Does it really matter? Is it 17 trillion, 20 trillion, 25 trillion? Who really cares? As Everett Dirksen said, a billion here and a billion there, and eventually you're talking about real money. Well, we're not talking about real money. We're talking about the opposite of Everett Dirksen. Really, nobody's really seeming to pay attention to the fact that the Congress a couple months ago passed a new ruling that the debt limit doesn't apply. So why do you care? I mean, I know there's blank silence there, but there are other things that are going on that are really quite interesting. First of all, by saying that the limit doesn't apply anymore, they don't have to argue about raising it. They can just keep on increasing the debt. But a very interesting thing happened 3 or 4 months ago where a lesson was seemingly learned that the cost of the shutdown is more than just continuing. Wow, we had extra costs for a shutdown. You'd think that closing a store would reduce the cost. But, if you've got a big corporation and they've got several different business segments, they'd have to cut off one business segment and it would cost extra money because you've got to, pay off a lease to end it, pay on legal fees, give some severance pay. It's all just a big stinking mess. But there's another bigger overarching issue, I believe, and it has to do with necrology, the study of dead tissue. The United States, I don't think, is going to be killed as the host. I think it's going to be bled to death and harvested for its organs, and done so by China. China is working now. We'll get to some of the details, but they're working the arms and legs right now. I mean, gosh, a few years ago, they stole some weapon systems from Sandia Labs. What was that all about? Well, that's because Clinton left the door open. And there's an entire story behind that, including some Pentagon resignations and firings and maybe assassinations from a downed aircraft that was never reported, wiped out of the news. So we got working arms and legs, and I think they're going to change the purpose in order for the Chinese to drain this nation and all the Western nations of all their gold. They're not going to kill the nation. They're going to drain it of its assets and take control of commercial properties. So, who cares about a debt limit? I mean, can you really define the difference between 20 trillion and 17? I can't.
It's a big number, I know that. And the Chinese are also building, enterprise zones, or, like in Idaho and now Detroit and other places. They're talking about that. Tell me about that.
Okay. I asked some questions recently, and I heard that Idaho has some industrial parks. Upstate New York has some industrial parks. I am guessing that California has some industrial parks. And if you look closely, you'll see that they're buying up idle manufacturing facilities, like in Detroit, Michigan, and Lansing, Michigan. They're secretly converting treasury bonds into enormous U.S.-based commercial property. I thought that they owned 30% of Manhattan, the financial area of New York. But a friend of mine told me last night, who's much more versed on the situation, that the Chinese now have 60% of the financial area of South Manhattan. They're doing a trick. I learned this from somebody who's very well versed in global finance. He said what the Chinese are doing is they're bringing in billions into the United States, and it's all coming under the guise of devoted toward the industrial parks, which have the U.S. government blessing and are being paved with maybe some tranches of Fannie Mae mortgage bonds that they never fully divested. And once they got the billions into the country, they're using Wells Fargo, which is the healthiest of all the big banks, the big money center banks. Now they've got this relationship with Wells Fargo, and what they're doing is they're taking the multi-billions coming in and they're multiplying it by 5. They're using that as collateral for loans by Wells Fargo, fully collateralized with high security treasury bonds. They call them pristine collateral. Well, now the government's pissed off because that 5 times as much capital is being used by additional New York office buildings, additional Los Angeles office buildings, idle Philadelphia industrial and maybe refinery properties, and my old hometown, Pittsburgh. I can assure you I've made the trip many times down the Ohio River, down the Monongahela River. There is plant after plant of idle plants doing nothing for 20 years. Now, I don't think they're going to just walk in there and say, oh, let's turn it all on. No, they're going to walk in there and spend billions in renovating. And it's already starting to show up in some of the labor statistics. And, in funny ways. I don't want to get into all the hard details on it, but you're starting to see things like hiring going on by hidden Chinese corporations. They're calling them CHMs, Chinese Americans, CHM Corp. And it looks like corporate America is reviving, but it's not. It's Chinese coming in as commercial colonists.
So let's move on to Saudi Arabia. I mean, I couldn't believe it when I heard them just recently say that the Obama administration, the Saudis, said the Obama administration stabbed them in the back, end quote. Quote, stabbed them in the back, the Obama administration. That, this is one of the things you've been calling for, the end of the petrodollar, that the Saudis won't be taking a payment exclusively in dollar. It's going to have big hardships and big, consequences for Americans. Can we talk about that for a minute? That's a big story for 2014.
It's a big story of 2014. Let me list my big 4. One is the NSA consequences with canceled contracts for the big multinationals. The second is the petrodollar demise with severe Saudi conflict. The third is hidden U.S. government debt default, which I believe might have already begun. And the fourth is a trigger of bank failures by Deutsche Bank. But regarding Saudi and the death of the petrodollar, this is almost like a no-brainer. But if you were to sample opinions of 100 Americans on the street, you might find 3 out of 100 who might even know what the petrodollar is. They don't know what it is. They just say the dollar is our currency, and they don't even understand that it's the currency used for trade settlement around the world. They don't understand that it's the currency for oil settlement. Anyway, let's just back up a bit here and talk about Al-Qaeda and our president. I've long thought that Al-Qaeda is not a group of terrorists from fundamental Islamics. I've thought about it as much more of a black bag operation of our own. It's quite interesting and full of intrigue that there's no great flap. It's pretty amazing to me that the President of the United States suddenly in the last year regarding the Middle East and North Africa, MENA they call it now, aligned U.S. foreign policy and this Arab Spring with Al-Qaeda. So Al-Qaeda is now our ally? I thought they were a terrorist organization. The flap that should be coming is, why isn't the United States being identified as a terrorist organization? Because we've aligned with one, and we tried to install a puppet in Egypt, and it got overthrown by the Saudis, by the way. We tried to do gun running through the Libyan embassy, and it got halted, and the ambassador got in the way, was murdered. And we ended up, as a benefit of that, having all the Libyan Gaddafi gold in London stolen. That's not a small amount, 143 tons. So you get all this flap going on where we're not playing ball with the good guys anymore. We're aligning ourselves with terrorist organizations. And I think that there was this Iran peace talks, nuclear talks, whatever you want to call it. I call it the petrodollar resignation. Oh gosh, there's a better word, a better name that I had for it. It's the petrodollar resignation, the petrodollar death summit. And nations had to come together and understand, well, what are the new rules if the petrodollar is not going to be around? So if we're going to have a sunset of the petrodollar, what are the new rules of engagement? If we as a nation, and let's just say Turkmenistan or Turkey, if we as a nation decide we don't want to settle trade in the dollar, are we going to be declared a terrorist nation? Are we going to be subjected to bank sanctions? Are we going to be subjected to blockades? Are we going to be subjected to bombings?
From the U.S.?
From the U.S., yes. So it's like the rules of engagement took place regarding the Iran nuclear talks. And I never really believed that it was just about nuclear talks. I thought it was about, well, let's now give permission to Iran to settle their oil and gas trade outside the dollar. And if they want to do it in gold, well, that's their business, but we're going to try to get in their way. But we're not going to do bank sanctions.
Is this why the Saudis came out and said that they felt that Obama administration stabbed them in the back? That they had this big, we're not going to let them have nuclear weapons. We're going to all of a sudden, yeah, you can. I mean, this bizarre public policy turnaround to me. I mean, I'm not advocating for or against Iran, but I'm just saying, what is the policy? It's wackadoodle.
It's wackadoodle, but I think you're swallowing a misdirection there. The Saudis were not pissed off at the Iranians for nuclear weapons. That's the problem for digesting in American press. The Saudis were upset that Iran, with its gas pipelines, numerous gas pipelines, were going to be interfering with the petrodollar because the gas would have an outlet in a Syrian port. And it would not be settled in dollars, and it would feed the European market, and it would be managed by Russian Gazprom. This whole thing is misdirection. The Saudis are pissed off at the United States for stabbing in the back because with Al-Qaeda, they were guilty of chemical weapons usage in Syria. And the U.S. and Western press blamed it on the Assad loyalists when it was really the Saudis using British chemical weapons. And Putin stepped in and in a brilliant chess move blocked the U.S., and the U.S. backed down like a tiger with its tail up its ass. So that's why the Saudis are angry. The U.S. did not follow through with the chemical weapons ploy.
Which would start a war and try to knock the Assad regime and the Russians out of the box. And I don't think the Russians were going to go quietly. I mean, we almost had war. I mean, Gerald Celente was talking about, the trends forecaster, war in 2013. And we were really close. And all of a sudden, the zone got flooded with U.S. ships and Russian ships. Not just a few. I mean, many. And you don't know what else was there under the water. Submarines, that kind of stuff. Who knows what was there? But we were close.
Yeah, we were, Greg, but back in 2005, we were told that we would have a war with Iran. And in 2006, we were told that there'd be a war with Iran. In 2007, a war with Iran. In 2008, a war with Iran. In 2009, a war with Iran. 2010, a war with Iran. 2011, a war with Iran. 2012, a war with Iran. 2013, are you catching a pattern here?
So we're not going to have a war with Iran.
We're not going to have a war with Iran. We're going to have a peace talks with Iran. Iran is going to be kind of a twisted sister buddy. And the new terrorist in the Persian Gulf is going to be Saudi Arabia, and you're already starting to see it with the New York Times articles. It's painting them as a complicit agent in 9/11.
You were talking about how they could get scattered in a year, the Saudi royal family. Talk about that.
I think they might, but they're going to try to pull this all together and strike up. I mean, just in the last couple of weeks, there's been a conference for a strategic partnership initiative with China and the Gulf nations. It was 4 main Gulf nations led by the Saudis. Well, what the hell's that all about? They're absent their protector, the U.S. military. They're absent. I've been in touch with The Voice about a few things regarding the Saudis, and he has his own staff and research facility, and they're just really on target year after year. They once thought in 2011 we might have a tactical war with Iran, but in 3 weeks they said, nope, it's not going to happen. Just forget what we said. Don't forget it, but just consider that actions have been taken to stop that. Cooler heads prevail, I called it. But we've been talking about how things are going to be moving on the chessboard. And I said to him, it sounds to me like Russia is going to use China and Dubai along with Iran to pressure the Saudis and turn the screws in order to shift it to a petro-yuan. And he said, spot on.
Huh.
Then I said, look for, this is, with a group of 3 or 4 of us, including the voice. Then I said, after hearing you guys and your contributions, it all sounds really good. You sound like you really are on top of all this. And the voice was not participating at this point. It was Euroraj, who's got some very strong Iran, Turkey, and India connections. A brilliant fellow. And I said to him, sounds to me like Putin. By the way, remember Putin got threatened by Prince Bandar of the Saudis?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Finger pointing face to face to Vladimir Putin. I mean, the last guy in the world I would ever want to put my finger in front of his face is Vladimir Putin. He threatened Putin and said, we cannot control the Arabs, and, if you don't help us in Syria, we're going to unleash the Chechen Muslims. And he doesn't care about, the Saudis feeling like they got stabbed in the back by the Americans. He's wondering about, are the Saudis going to unleash their Al-Qaeda machine that's been working with the U.S. for a long time? Are the Al-Qaeda boys going to disrupt their Sochi Olympics? And I wrote back, and this is something that the voice did not participate in, but 3 or 4 of us, we like to chew things over and pass things around and say, what do you think about this? And what does this factor? How does this work in? Anyway, I thought Putin is going to force the Saudis to adopt certain financial devices in oil pricing. And the adoption will wreck the U.S. relations, will undermine the petrodollar, and will force the Saudis into divesting a bunch, I mean like billions, tens and hundreds of billions of treasury bonds, and maybe force them to sell off a bunch of big bank stocks like Prince Al-Walid and his Citigroup stock. So look for Putin to act like a wedge, to force something. And I think it's going to be a financial instrument tied to Saudi oil sales and linked to Russian oil sales, that it has a connection to the Shanghai futures contract priced in yuan. I think Putin is going to use a wedge to force the Saudis to swallow the petro-yuan and really cause bitterness with the Americans. That's what I think is going to happen.
What happens to inflation and gold over here in the U.S.?
Well, I've got a friend who came back from Arizona a couple of weeks ago, and he said, Jim, I do something every time I go to Arizona because I visit family and friends. I have a basket of food that I buy, and I keep a list, and I leave it at my mother's house. And the list in 2011 cost $90. The list in 2012 went from $90 to $130. The list now costs $190. We're talking about 50% price inflation for his basket of food. 50. Not the 1.2 or 2.5 innocuous, harmless price inflation that these effing clowns come up with who run our banking policy. Anyway, the Saudis are buying a lot of gold. I'm in touch with agents who are involved with China gold acquisition. And Dubai is a big center of that. And now I'm told Dubai doesn't have a single bar of gold. The Chinese have bought it all. And not only are the London and Swiss boys sending over ETF gold bars, but they're recasting them. They're no longer, 999, 99.9% gold. They're 5 nines, 99.39s gold, and they're in kilogram denominations. So they're making it they're accommodating the conforming standards of China. So London is being drained. And I think I've mentioned this before, but back in early and spring months of 2012, the Voice was involved personally with a project to remove 1,000 tons of London gold per month.
Oh, God. They're going to run out. I mean, aren't they going to run out? That's what Eric Sprott says. They're running on fumes. He runs the $8 billion Sprott Asset Management Fund. He's had egg on his face for a few years, but I think he'll be proven right. The long-term trend for gold and silver is up, is it not, in price?
It is. Well, I don't worry about price. I think price is going to take care of itself. And I think a lot of people in the gold community are on the wrong focus. Like they look to COMEX. I mean, let's face it. Bill Murphy has a daily report where he talks about, in the Le Metropole Cafe, he talks about the commitment of traders. He talks about the movement of gold in and out of the COMEX. He talks about, I prefer to talk about the vaults.
How many ounces are there? How many ounces, how many tons?
If they don't have any more gold, I don't care what their price is. It's like saying I'm going to Walmart to buy shoes, but they don't have any. But they got a really attractive price. They don't have any, though. All right, so anyway, back in March, April, May, and June of 2012, The Voice was part of a large project that moved 1,000 tons of London gold per month to points east. And I said, was this mainly China, like Beijing and Hong Kong? And he said, primarily, but not exclusively. And I said, where else? Like Singapore or Seoul, Korea? And he said, well, other places too. And he wouldn't say. I think he couldn't say. He's not permitted, not at liberty to say. All right. Something very interesting happened, though, Greg. In October and November and December, I would also ask, hey, sir, could you tell me, is there still a lot of movement of London gold, or was it just those 4 months? And I got no answer. So I let a couple months pass. February and March, I asked, hey, are you still getting a lot of movement from London? No answer. So this summer, I asked again, are you still getting 1,000 tons a month? Any big movement? No answer. Well, in October, he said, it never stopped. It's been 1,000 tons a month for over 18 months.
Oh, my God. When are they going to run out? Is 2014 the year they drain them dry?
I think so. Look what happened with the German repatriation demand that was about a year ago now. I don't know the exact date. I think it was a little over a year ago. They didn't get their gold, Greg, and the French even announced that they're going to start a war in Mali because suddenly a bunch of terrorists were spotted next to some gold mines. This is transparent stuff. You've got to have a Bush-like 90 IQ not to follow what's going on. And believe me, there are a lot of people in the United States who have a Bush-like 90 IQ.
So you think that this is the year, A, that somebody comes up and says, well, we cannot or will not deliver gold, and B, that will, so it's going to come down to, do you have it or do you not? Do you have a pair of shoes or do you not have a pair of shoes? Do you have gold or do you not have gold?
Well, I think we saw in June, July, and August of 2013 that J.P. Morgan, running the COMEX, said you're not going to get gold or silver from your futures contracts. So you're wondering if 2014 would be the year that they don't get their gold. No, 2013 was. They were forced into cash redemption. And the only party to accept any gold and silver contracts in the last 6 months has been J.P. Morgan. They've flipped from a huge net short to a huge net long, which opens up a gigantic new question, Greg. Why did they sell their headquarters for half price to the Chinese? Talking about J.P. Morgan's headquarters, One Chase Plaza, $720 million. When I saw the figure, I thought it was a misprint. I thought, oh, you mean 1.7 billion? No, it's 720 million, 725.
Why did they do that?
I think it's a default on something.
Oh, and the cheap price was making up for what they didn't give them.
Yeah, think of it as seizure of a collateral, a big piece of collateral, which begs a huge question. What contract went into failure?
Wow.
If they defaulted and had to give up their headquarters, what did they default on?
Wow.
So Rob Kirby is another colleague of mine, and he's just, he's not, you can't just use simple words like a smart guy and really experienced. He's a brilliant fellow who has a great nose.
Yeah.
And
we had him on. He was stunning. He was like you. He was good.
Imagine a dozen conversations that I have with him per year. We have a lot of very interesting talks, and we also laugh a lot. He's a funny man, and he's very curious about some things that are going on in Central America, and we laugh a lot. But anyway, we put our heads together a month ago, trying to figure out what did J.P. Morgan default on, and this answer that Rob gave was a result of investigating something that we've been really thinking about for 4 or 5 months. What does the Department of Treasury use as collateral, as their fund flow, their flow of funds? What does the Department of Treasury use to securitize a lot of exchange stabilization fund activity? And the answer is the IRS tax receipts. It's steady. In fact, you can't really fudge it. I use it steadily to look at to see how bad is the recession in the United States. Well, how bad are the tax receipts falling? How bad is electricity usage falling? These are basic things to dispute the federal statistics that are garbage. So Rob reasoned that in 1999, a very complex deal was struck, and it had a lot of elites going over to China making deals, and a lot of Rockefeller types over there, and I think Kissinger was there too. So we gave them most favored nation status in 99, and I immediately thought, what the hell for? Why would we want to open the way for foreign direct investment and shed the rest of our manufacturing and industry in the United States after the Pacific Rim in the 80s and 90s already took a bunch of it? What is this, a climax blow of cutting the jugular to the U.S. economy? Who are the traitors signing this? What's the other side of the most favored nation status granted? What's the other side of the deal? Well, I learned in 2010 that it was a huge lease of Chinese gold. And then Rob Kirby put it together. He said, securitized with collateral from Internal Revenue Service funds. Think of it as a secure income, securitizing the derivatives behind what solidified the gold lease from China. Now, we reneged and didn't give them back their gold. It was supposed to go back in 07 or 08. We told them, F you, we're going to keep your gold. Besides, it's all gone anyway. And, it's okay because, we're supporting the system and you're better creditors in the system. It's all good. Everyone wins. And the Chinese have turned around and say, well, we're going to ditch the dollar because you have reneged on a deal. Rob Kirby believes, and I now am starting to believe, I'm like 80% convinced that J.P. Morgan had a huge derivative securitized by IRS funds. Now, you can accept the rubbish that we've got a slow recovery. No, it's so much not a recovery that they're calling it the non-recovery recovery. I mean, this is Reich finance straight out of Nazi Germany lexicon. I'm not a friggin' moron. We've got a 4% recession every year since 2009. We got, therefore, a 25% reduction in our nominal U.S. economy. The impact is on U.S. tax receipts. It's not there. These clowns in Washington say, yeah, but you've got a big, strong buildup in small business. Well, really? I think that's perhaps the main pain zone, not the recovery area. So, as the Chinese were reneged upon for their gold lease, they gave it a little time until they were reneged upon on their IRS payment stream. And late last year they decided, enough's enough, we're going to call in the collateral of the J.P. Morgan headquarters, and furthermore, we're going to go ahead and we're going to buy up the Goldman Sachs aluminum and industrial metals warehouses. And gosh, you didn't have to wait 2 weeks where Rosneft, which is twice as big as ExxonMobil, the Russian energy giant, bought the Morgan Stanley energy desk. So, you got the Chinese owning now the largest private vault in the world, which has underground connections to the Federal Reserve, the J.P. Morgan headquarters. J.P. Morgan is the operating arm of the Federal Reserve. Did China buy the Fed?
Wow.
Okay, so who's going to control the oil and the gold prices? On the financial side, I think it's going to be Russia and China. And I think they're going to institute the petro-yuan and shove a hot poker up Washington's arse.
Would that start a war?
Greg, I got news for you. We've been at war with China now for the last 5 years in southern Africa. We've got soldier casualties in Walter Reed Army Hospital in Washington, D.C. every single month. Most of them are coming from Djibouti, which controls the Horn of Africa, the entry to the Suez Canal, which is a major strategic port. We're already at war with China. We're at war in Congo. Congo, by the way, is larger in land mass than all of Western Europe. These are very large nations. They're whacked out, they're crazy, they're disrupted, of course they're disrupted, because remember we used to call it the Belgian Congo? Belgium, back in the 50s and 60s, set it up as a colony where they destroyed the leadership in order to get these cheap metal contracts, mineral contracts. Nothing has ever changed. We get millions killed every year in Congo in order to supply. And there's a lot of gold coming out of the Congo. Hey, a lot of gold, a lot of minerals, copper, iron, just huge amounts. And alongside the big movement of minerals and metals are cemeteries. But they're not really cemeteries. They're more like giant pits where you put 1,000 Congolese dead. That's what we do. But there's war in southern Africa. I don't mean the Union of South Africa. I mean the southern nations of Africa. And part of it spilled over into Nairobi, Kenya a few months ago at that shopping mall. It's related to the war with the United States and China. And there's an Al-Qaeda element to it. But okay.
What is this effect going to be for the U.S. for the people listening to this interview? What does this mean to me on Main Street America? That the U.S. is losing its dollar, petrodollar, which is going to mean inflation. I mean, you and John Williams think the same thing. There's going to be inflation, but you get there a little differently, you two. But both of you agree we're going to have some pretty big inflation. What's your view on the inflation, how we get there? I guess inflation, no matter how you get there, is going to be damaging. Who cares, right? But how do we get there?
I'd like to have a preliminary point that John Williams is just great. He's great at what he does with the data series. He's just great. I've been relying on his work for price inflation, the unemployment rate, and economic growth rate. I've been relying on it, and it's outstanding, the world's best. But I'm sorry, you got to be careful. He's been saying we're going to have strong price inflation for the last 3 years. And I've been saying, no, I don't think so. Not until the U.S. dollar is rejected globally. It's not going to, he's been saying, well, the money supply is growing so rapidly that we're going to have price inflation. No, we're not. He said that in 2010 and 11. No, we're not. It's not going to get into Main Street. It's going to be hogged by Wall Street. It's going to go to cover mortgage bonds. It's going to go to cover all kinds of different bonds. It's going to go to cover derivatives and AIG stuff.
He thinks when people start selling it, that's when, he thinks...
No, because those are black holes, Greg. New money is going into black holes that doesn't get the street. It goes into the sewer and you never see it again. Because we've got hidden trillion-dollar and quadrillion-dollar losses from derivatives. We're printing money. I think we're printing $200 to $300 billion a month to cover the derivatives. And they don't say we got a QE program to cover derivatives. They say we have a QE program to cover mortgage bonds and treasury bonds. They never talk about the derivatives. They never talk even about the collateralized debt obligations, which are leveraged square mortgage bonds. No. So in the last 3 or 4 years, John Williams has been saying something that's not been correct, that the money supply grows out of control, the Fed balance sheet grows out of control, we're going to get price inflation. I say no, and I've been very consistent about this for 3 years. No, because it's not permitted to go to Main Street. Any new business investment done by American corporations is done in the emerging market nations. Where you have business investment, that's where you have economic growth. I have been saying steadily, not until the dollar has problems and the globe starts saying we're not going to use it anymore and we're going to force a devaluation on you and we're going to not have trade settlement in the dollar, that is when the dollar will hit Main Street and the U.S. economy with price inflation. And I think it's coming this year.
Oh, coming this year. When? That's my next question, coming this year. So back to the gold question. Either you're going to have wealth or you're not. Either you have ounces of gold or silver or you don't, is what your basic price. Don't forget about the price. Either you have it or you don't, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and this is the year where I think the COMEX will formally no longer sell gold contracts for futures.
Wow.
Well, if they don't have any gold, what's your contract for? Cash settlement? What the hell is that, Greg? What's that? We're gonna sell you a contract at Walmart to buy shoes, but when you come, we're gonna give you the cash equivalent on what the shoes are worth. Are you kidding me?
No shoes. Yeah.
No shoes.
Yeah.
No shoes at Walmart. Okay, you don't control price if you don't have any. And now you're getting, okay, I once in a while I look for what is the Shanghai differential on gold price. And for their futures, it's really only 20 to 40 bucks. But that's enough to make money on if you got tonnage. And if you can hang along a big air shipment and put along a few tons and not have to pay a whole lot, you can make some good money on their arbitrage, and they're doing just that. But that's just the Shanghai futures. I asked The Voice, what is the price differential for substantial volume gold purchases in Asia? And he said $200 to $400 premium.
An ounce.
Per ounce.
Wow, so it's really trading at 14 to
1600.
Wow.
And then he said, I expect that by the end of 2014, it might be $1,000 premium.
Whew. When do we start seeing the actual price ratchet up from, the 12-something mark around here to $2,200 if it's $1,000 premium? When does that start happening here in the U.S. for people who are holding precious metals? I suspect silver will also go up.
It just addresses a question that I'm firm about. I don't care what the COMEX says. You're saying, when will the price show it? I don't care what the COMEX price is. It's not a price from a valid market because they don't have any inventory. They're not delivering on their gold contracts, so they're a fraudulent arena. The only ones accepting delivery is J.P. Morgan after they forced HSBC and Bank of America to pony up some of their gold and Scotia-Makota out of Canada. There is no valid market, so I don't give a damn what the COMEX gold price is. I get questions almost every day. What do you think about the gold price? Blah, blah, blah. And I say, I don't look at the COMEX gold price. I didn't more than 15 times for the whole stinking year of 2013. I'm looking at important things, like the J.P. Morgan Vault inventory for gold. I don't care that there was a $30 drop in a recovery a couple of days ago on the COMEX, because they don't have any gold. I believe the gold they show in their data and their inventory is phony. I don't believe they have any gold. And the gold that's moving out of London has got markings that say 1970. We are taking the Queen's gold out of London. This is a late stage, Greg. Very late stage.
And how big's the price inflation you're going to see here? 50%, 100%, 200%? I mean, what's going to happen?
I don't know. I think it's going to be very different in different categories. Like we're seeing, I've got a few different clients who sent me emails saying, I'm paying $9 a gallon for milk right now. And I should have said, what state are you living in? But I'm busy. I'm doing other things. And I've got a personal life, too. And I've got some other projects that are going on during Christmas. And I try to take 2 weeks where I didn't do much of anything because there's not much to follow. in the business world during Christmas. There's always some, but I don't really know. I noticed that in the last couple of years, the price of oil has not really changed much. It's 95 to 105. You can say that it's following the money supply, but you'd be wrong. Money supply is going up a lot, and the price of oil is not. I asked the same friend who did the Arizona price check of his basket of food for the last 3 years. I said, "Did you do gasoline?" And he said, "Yes." I can't remember what it was 2 years ago, but it went from $3.20 to $3.80 this year. All right, that's 60 cents on $3.20. That's not quite 20% in 1 year. All right, so 20% inflation for gasoline, and let's just say at least 30 or 40% for food. I got other clients who say, I'm paying 30% more for insurance. Car, business, home, fire insurance. Okay, well, I don't know what the exact price inflation is going to be. It's going to be different across different categories in the U.S., but we didn't even get to a real big important point. Maybe we'll save that for next time, but we have talked about it a little in the past, the currency reset. I really think that we're going to see before long either a gold-backed new dollar or what I call a shit dollar. The shit dollar is going to be split, and it will be suffering the consequences of the Federal Reserve printing of the dollar. We're going to see a 50% decline, devaluation in the dollar, which will more than double the prices. I mean, I get people telling me, Jim, you talk about a 30% currency devaluation, but 1 over 0.7 is more than a 30% price. And I said, yeah, I know. Don't tell me about basic mathematics. I'm making a heuristic argument on an interview, for God's sake. If you want me to explain to you the Taylor expansion of 1 over 1 minus x, I'd be glad to do it.
You do have a PhD in statistics.
Yeah,
I can't believe somebody's questioning your math. That's
it's
funny.
1 plus x minus x squared plus x cubed.
Uncle, I'm not questioning your math.
Okay. All right.
So it's suffice to say, people are going to get a rude awakening when we have this currency reset. You think it's coming this year, early or late?
I don't know. What I'm learning is it's 10 times later than let's look to our past experience. Everything is 3 to 10 times slower than we think. When in 2008, didn't you expect that a couple big banks would fail in the following couple of years?
Yes.
Well, here we are 5 years later, and they didn't.
Yes.
I think Deutsche Bank is going to cause a string of bank failures. It's working slowly but surely.
This year.
Deutsche Bank, London and New York banks and Western Europe, French banks, Deutsche Bank is going to cause some real big problems in the bank. It's a contagion, a domino effect of failed banks. But let me repeat something that I've done probably 3 or 4 times on your show. When the big impact comes from the dollar global rejection and a devaluation does take place, there will be 3 effects. One, you see a jump in prices. It won't be even across the board. It'll be different regarding what sector. Now, if you're talking about clothing, you can have liquidation sales. You're not going to get a huge price increase for clothing or any other liquidation item. But you're going to get big price inflation. You're going to get supply disruptions because the world's not going to want the stinking dollar, and they're sure not going to want the shit dollar after it splits, because the shit dollar is not going to take just one devaluation. Your example is the Venezuelan bolivar. It took a 40% devaluation, then 3 months later, another 35%. And now they're running raging 100% price inflation where people are going across the border to buy beans because they're exporting their beans and draining their own supply. Will the United States export its food and cause food shortages in the United States? I think, hell yes, they will, because that's human nature. The third effect, first is prices, next is supply disruption. The third one is violence. We're going to get civil disorder, and I point to supermarkets for food, gas stations for gasoline, and ATMs for cash. People are going to get robbed right outside the ATM machines. You're going to have fights. You're going to have explosions of gasoline stations. I mean, shots are fired and, hey, a gas station blew up. 20 dead. I mean, these are not small explosions. They're explosions that you can see 20 miles away. The supply disruptions you're already starting to see in Walmart with empty shelves. It's because of a different factor, but it's related. It has to do with shortage, but it also has to do with their cash management. And they're very tight. It's like just-in-time inventory for Walmart and their food, but it's more than food. It's their shelves. So, yeah, I think this is the year that things break. I remember putting out an article at Christmas of 2007 and the first week of 2008. I said, this is the year the system breaks. And we got the Lehman Brothers. We got the subprime. We got it all happen in 2008. This is the year I think we're going to have the currency explosions. This is the year the petrodollar will not necessarily die, but be taken to the intensive care where it will later die. This is the year where trade settlement becomes done on an increasing basis. And you just had a deal today between Russia and Iran, oil for finished products, oil for other products. It's barter. The gold trade settlement is going to come out of the barter system. I've been saying it for a while. The Voice has been preaching this now for 3 or 4 years. The yuan swap facility is also based in barter. You've got, say, Australia and China in trade. All right, well, what's the net difference? Let's settle that between our major banks, and let's do it in yuan. And we got a big credit facility there waiting for you. And we'll do it in yuan. Well, now the Chinese have announced publicly, we don't want a dollar-centric global system no more. We don't want it no more. This is revolutionary stuff. The Chinese have told you with their J.P. Morgan's acquisition and their desire no longer to have dollar-centric, they've told you 2014 is going to be the year of tumult.
And finally, in closing, I don't want a long dissertation on this, but I've been harping about the Obamacare thing, and some people say, "Oh, give it a chance; it won't be so bad." And I just want to get your, thumbnail, appraisal of how that will help or hurt the U.S. economy.
It'll be 100 times the nightmare that you think it might be. It'll be like a sledgehammer put to your television set or your dinner table set or to your car windshield and front grille. It will be a very sneaky, hidden project. I thought when it was first announced, oh, gee, this is just a wet blanket on the whole economy. And then we started seeing reactions by companies that they were laying off their workers or moving them from full-time to part-time. One of the biggest job destroyers right now is Obamacare. And then you've got the stories about the private citizens who are scared about, well, gee, if I don't sign up, I'm going to get fined. And they're telling me that it's going to cost an extra $2,000. No, it was $5,000. It's going to cost more than you thought. And don't expect to get those hip replacements and that cancer treatment if you're over 72. I call it hospice care. This is going to be managed death. Managed death of the individuals and managed death of the economy. Small business is already bracing for it. They're laying people off. They're moving people to part-time. They don't want the cost. But there are two hidden, ugly little things with Obamacare. The first one, no question about it, because we're already seeing it in evidence. You've got to do a personal financial statement to register for Obamacare. I don't bother getting into the issues of the website doesn't work. Of course it doesn't work. Michelle's buddy got the contract for it. Her Princeton University buddy with no extensive website experience got the contract for it. So you've got to file a financial statement, and it's the way that they infiltrate your financial room. The second thing I think is just as pernicious, and that's, you're starting to see various things regarding IDs, and, you're going to have a national ID card associated with your health insurance. The U.S. is one of the few nations that doesn't have a national ID card. We rely on your state driver's licenses, which is really quite interesting, implying states' rights prevail over federal. That's about to change. So you get this national ID card, which I think later has provisions for a chip on your upper left arm. Now, anyone who saw the Hunger Games movie, that was a lot of fun. It had a sequel. That was a lot of fun, too. And each time, the girl, I can't remember, Jennifer Lawrence, each time she said, "What's that?" Well, they injected an implant chip in her arm so they could track her. So I regard this as being the whole Obamacare. It's like a big plan to track people, both their money and their bodies, like a bunch of herded animals. You know, when you go to the banking elite, they regard us as trash. We're nothing more than vassals. We're occupying their land. Jamie Dimon said 2 years ago, the world would be a better place if the bankers ran it. Oh, really? What, you could have widespread fraud? And what? You want to harvest organs in FEMA camps? Oh, boy. No, this is herding farm animals. And if the farm animal develops a hoof and mouth disease, you put them down. You don't waste money on them. This is tax money. I talked with a different friend the other day, and he said, "Jim, you know, I got 2 bad knees. I'm thinking about having knee replacement, but I'd have to stay in the United States for 3 months." And I said, "Well, who paid for it?" And he said, "Medicare." I said, "How old are you?" He said, 65. I said, "Holy mackerel. You get some free knees, huh?" Well, multiply it by a few thousand or 10,000 or 100,000. The Bush 2 Medicare was designed to kill the finances of the country. These guys are not bringing about change for better lives. They're bringing about change for a wrecked nation. And you could tell me that I'm this negative guy and I always crying wolf, but you know, I've got a lot of big forecasts, and most of them are true, like over 90% of them. And take a look at the economists on Wall Street. They're running at 10 to 20% correct forecasts, but they're not paid on correct forecasts. They're paid on supporting their mortgage bond flow, their corporate bond issuance flow, their stock IPO flow. Look at even the gold community and the various forecasters there. You find a lot of guys who are clownishly recommending mining stocks. Well, the ugliest thing I've learned about mining stocks in the last couple months is a friend of mine who I knew from conferences was pulled out of a black SUV in Mexico along with everybody in the car, and with a boot on their neck, spent 90 minutes with their face in the dust with submachine guns by some drug cartel guys.
Taking the gold.
Well, they take the gold out of the trucks. They don't use BRICS trucks anymore to take mine output from the mills. You know, the what do you call it? Dory bars that are 90% gold. They don't use BRICS trucks anymore. They use unmarked vehicles and a lot of smaller ones because the drug cartels are hijacking them, and the mining companies are lying about their mine output because they don't want to admit that they're getting hijacked. And they don't want to admit that their CFO and their COO and their head of engineering got kidnapped. I was told about a story of this clownish, small Canadian mining company CEO who was told by my buddy, "Don't go to a 5-star hotel in Mexico City for meeting clients. Go to a 3-star. Don't dress well. Don't walk out and have a limo waiting for you." So he did precisely that, and he got abducted. In 20 seconds, Greg, leaving the 5-star hotel. They took all his money. They took his Rolex watch. I asked, did they take his shoes? The guy said, well, my friend said, I'm never going back to Mexico. I'm not going to make these trips anymore. This is not safe. I spent 90 minutes. I said, how'd you get the boot off your neck and the dust out of your mouth? How'd you get up on your I was going to say all 4 legs. How'd you get back on your 2 legs? And he said, one of the guys on our group was a Mexican bilingual translator. So he could speak Mexican. I love that joke. He can speak Mexican fluently. No, he can speak Spanish. So for half an hour of plating, with his face in the dirt, and a boot on either his neck or his back, I'm not sure, they finally plated and said, no. We're not that other drug cartel bunch that you're looking for. We've got a black SUV and so do they, but look, here's our ID. Here's our business card. Here's our credentials. And we're coming from XYZ Mining Corp that's just 20 miles that way. If you make a right here and go down, that's where we're coming from. So they lit them up, but my friend said, I'm never going back to Mexico. And mining stock investors need to realize, in early '08, I said mining stocks are not a good investment. 5 years later, I think you can say that was a good call.
Yeah, I'd say that was a good call.
Now you're getting all kinds of other risks, like labor strikes, like Pascua Lama in the Argentine-Chile border is shut down. That's an $8 billion investment shut down. You're getting violence in South Africa. You're getting new labor union agreements in South Africa. You're getting confiscation like in Venezuela. Oh, God. You can go on. I make a long list because I get maybe 6 or 8 questions a month, not a month, a year. 6 or 8 questions a year about, gee, what should I do with my mining stocks? I said, why don't you sell them before it goes to a penny?
With that, Jim, Dr. Willie, we are going to cut it off. A long, in-depth interview. Love it. Going to run every minute of it. So thank you so much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. Of course, we've been talking with Dr. Jim Willie. He is the editor of the Hat Trick Letter that can be found on the goldenjackass.com website. Dr. Jim Willie, thanks for joining us today. Hope you come back in about a month.
My pleasure.